Hello, everybody, and I hope that you're having a good time here at the Future First Fall Brawl 2022. My name is Andrea Richmond, aka Bordey McBored. I'm a content creator, esports shoutcaster, hostess, and today I'm going to be a facilitator or interviewee of one lovely Todd Harris. Todd Harris is a man of many hats in this gaming space. But instead of me just talking my ear out about all the different things that Todd does, and it's a lot in this industry, I'll go ahead and let him introduce yourself. How you doing, Todd?
Doing great, Andrea. Get to talk about two of my favorite topics, video games and education today. So that makes me happy. Um, yeah, good to be here. A little bit about myself for all of y'all. Probably best known for being a co-founder of a video game company, a developer called High Res Studios. So I'm speaking to you from Atlanta, Georgia, and just up the road a bit in a suburb is High Res Studios, and that's about a 450 person company. They make games like Smite, Paladins, Rogue Company, Realm Royale, and that's really what got me into the world of video games. And these days, as we'll talk about, I wear a lot of hats when it comes to esports, including a production company and an esports team. So that's me. And it's great to be with you guys this afternoon.
Yeah, great to know a little bit about you. And also too, I am a local to the Atlanta area, so it's nice to know, hey, Atlanta people doing big things in this gaming space. But, you know, heard a little bit about you and had like a little tad bit about, what you might do in this space. But before we begin, let's start everything off with an icebreaker. You talked a little bit about gaming being one of your passions along with education. When and where did your love for gaming begin?
Ooh, that's a great question. So
Mhm.
I'm as young as I look. I got some years behind me. So I literally did grow up with Pong,
Mhm.
Magnavox, Odyssey 2, Pong. It was very primitive. It didn't even have digital scoring on the screen. Like if I scored on Andrea, I would literally take a little peg, a little physical peg, like on the
Mhm.
console and move it up one. But really, from there, it was the time of the Atari 2600 and playing in the arcades. And for me, the love of gaming, because at that young age, I was playing a lot with my father. I would go to the arcades with my dad or in the Pizza Hut playing Space Invaders. And that made me a game player. But one of the things that's probably the most influential things of becoming a game creator or working in the industry is the fact that my dad, he was a programmer at IBM. And way back then, there were not many programming jobs. It was very, very early. And not only was he a computer programmer, but IBM made a personal computer. This was, Commodore 64, Apple II, and then IBM came out with a computer. And we were super fortunate because we were one of the first households, I'd say, in the country to get our hands on an IBM computer. So I became a PC gamer
Mhm.
and I played all the games that were out there and thought, I'm going to have to learn how to make computer games because I've already played what's out there. So I need to start making them. And so that was really a switch for me of not just enjoying playing them, but the idea that I could create them. And that really drives a lot of my passion for games, for education and careers, because that was my personal story. I was very fortunate. Certainly not every young person grows up with even access to a computer
Yeah.
or access to materials to learn how to program or access to a representative role model that's working in the industry. And I had all of those. And I really credit those things for the career that I've had in tech and in gaming. So it was super influential for me personally, and I try to kind of pay it forward, and help kind of attach to projects and organizations, like our friends here at Futures First that are helping to deliver that sort of platform to more people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I got into gaming.
Yeah. First of all, let me say that I'm sure that when you were growing up, being the one of the first people in the country to have a computer, probably everyone was coming over to your house to play it, right? I'm sure. But you talk a little bit about how important it was to have that foundation, have somebody who was there, who could kind of guide you, who can be there for you as an example to make you feel like it is a possibility that you could do this as a career. Because oftentimes you would hear parents who lament about, why are you playing video games? There's nothing that you can do with these video games. There's no future in these video games. But now you're seeing things like the esports industry taking off. You're seeing content creation being a thing. You're seeing all these different assets. You have several different roles in the gaming industry, and we could talk about those a little bit later. But in what way would you say that, what would you tell parents who are still of that older mentality that there's nothing that you can do in gaming? And how do you feel, especially too, you've been there, like you had a parent that worked in IBM, one of the first people to have a computer. In what ways have you seen it change to where it's now even more of a viable career option?
Yeah, it's certainly, there's still some stigma, no doubt,
Yeah.
around playing games. And I get it as a parent myself. Parents are always thinking about, is my kid wasting their time, or is this
Yeah.
going to result in something meaningful? The first thing I like to point out to people is they just don't realize how large the industry is. They think it's only young people that play video games, and they just have no concept. So um, globally, the gaming and esports industry is $180 billion. And because all those numbers just run together, the biggest takeaway is if you take the entire film industry and the entire music industry and you put them together, gaming is bigger than those combined. So bigger than film and music combined. So a lot of revenue means a lot of job opportunities, means potential careers. So that's number one. The next thing that I like to share with folks is, people kind of wonder how many jobs there are being a professional gamer, and there aren't that many. It's just like professional sports. It's the 1% of the 1%, but there's so many jobs around that athlete or that esports competitor. So just like there's not many LeBron James, but around LeBron, he's got an agent, a lawyer, social media manager, film person, 100 jobs probably around that one. It's the same in the esports industry. So for many young people who think they want to grow up and be a professional gamer, that's probably not going to happen, but it's going to unlock other careers for them. And then the final thing is, if you're a parent and you're wondering, is your kid wasting their time? I really think about gaming as like exercise for the brain.
Mm-hmm.
There's this stigma around it, but if you think about an activity like chess, like people don't have the same stigma about chess. It's a game. It's just a mental sport, but for whatever reason, because it's been around longer, they're like, oh, like that's what smart people do. They play chess. But many of these video games, is, Andrea, they're as or more demanding than chess. There's a
Yeah.
lot of strategy, but you're also making decisions quickly. You're having to collaborate with a team. And so the positive things that come from mastering something like chess or participating in a team sport, those all can be delivered through video games as well. So like anything, you can do it too much, you can get out of balance, but when you harness it the right way, it can lead to a lot of life skills, a lot of character building. And the same reason most parents want their kids to participate in youth sports, because it
Mm-hmm.
just makes them a little bit of a better human. Those same sort of things are available through organized video games.
Yeah, and I love that too because a lot of times people think like you said that there's only one thing that you can do with it, or you're only just wasting your time. I have a lot of people that I know who have made friend groups, who have made solid friends over years. People who, I'm sure that you've seen it on the timeline, whatever timeline that you use, Twitter, Facebook, etc., where people are inviting people that they've met in video games to their weddings. All right. So this is not just like a social benefit, but this is also a career development pathway as well. I know that I love your background, by the way, because I feel like you hit a lot of different things about this gaming industry, right? Co-founder of High Res. You are now the head of Skillshop Media, and also too of which is production, and also too Ghost Gaming, right, which is an esports team. So personally all the different pathways that there are for these students to go for, and how they can navigate in these space, and the different ways that, hey, you're not just developing as a person, but also as a career advancement as well, to get some of that 180 billion that you were talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, on the social point, you're exactly right. I mean, not only inviting to weddings, sometimes you're finding your spouse in a game. I mean,
Yeah.
just down the road here, you may know our friend Allie Young, who runs a LAN center here. I mean,
Yes, I
she
do.
met her
Yeah.
husband playing a video game,
I did
and
not know that.
oh yeah, and my
Mhm.
and my son, he talks about his friends, and he uses the same word, whether they were his real life friend that he met in high school, he's now in college, or an online friend that he's talking to with in Discord. So as you know, and everyone watching on Twitch knows super well, you're you're starting out and you're talking about the game objectives and how you win, but then you vibe with someone and you become their friend, and next you're talking about life and school and ranting about your parents or whatever else it is. So it becomes a very real social relationship, and not kind of being a loner the way the stereotype is. But
Mm-hmm.
as you said, there's so many different careers. So I come from game developing, and that's a great industry. What makes that so unique is people think about like right brain and left brain, kind of like your math, engineering, and then your creative artists.
Mm-hmm.
And in a game development shop, whether it was High Res or anyone else, anywhere else, you're bringing those very different populations and work styles together, because the game is both a technical software project, a very complicated one, and has all the creativity and art and music that you would see in like an animated film, because you have 3D artists and animators and musicians. And that makes it a very fun, high energy place to work, because you kind of have both of these groups collaborating and making something. At the end of the day, your job is to make fun. That's a pretty good job description, create fun. And then Skillshot, as you know, is in the world of production and events. So there you're getting into skills like camera person or video editing. If you've ever been in a sports production truck or a live news studio, and you see all the big monitors and they're looking at a bunch of screens and saying, we're going to throw to you in 3, 2, 1, do it. That's the energy of production. So it's events. The show must go on. It's never perfect. You're always problem solving, but putting out the best broadcast. And then, as you mentioned, I'm also involved with the team. I'm repping Ghost Gaming. There you go. Look at that nice
Hey.
clean logo there. So Ghost is an esports team and a lifestyle org. And there you are talking about actually having professional players who earn their compensation by being sponsored by an org and also by winning tournaments. So they're basically getting paid based on how well they're doing. And then also influencers or creators are typically what they're called, YouTubers, Twitch folks that are engaging, and they tend to kind of earn their money based on sponsorships or their engagement on a platform like YouTube or Twitch and the subs that they're getting, et cetera. So that's a whole other flavor of the industry. And behind the scenes, the people you don't see on camera there's a lot of other jobs, anything that you would have in a big company, not in gaming, like human resources and project managers and accountants and lawyers. Those are also jobs that are needed in the game industry. So for a lot of young people, they have a passion for gaming. It may not be what they think it's going to be, but they're able to get a job in the industry. Keeps it fun.
Yeah, and I could talk a testament about my own pathway. I wanted to be a game developer and game programmer, and somehow, some way, I ended up in the shoutcasting industry, and something like that. So you never know where this gaming thing might lead you. And there are people that wear many hats, like you. You started in production, and well, not production in a sense of like putting on a show, but production as in development of a game, then production where it is a production of the show, and then also too as well, CEO of a brand, a lifestyle, esports organization. So there are a lot of different ways that you can go, including HR, etc. What would you? I'm sure that there are parents who are listening right now who are getting a lot of information about all the different things that their young one can enroll in. What are some programs that that can help students get into that space and start to get them onto the pathway to where they can be in this industry?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the first thing I'd tell parents is if they're worried about their kids' gaming habits and time, I would always say think about what activity that is replacing, because parents sometimes worry like, okay, they're not going outside as much, they're in their gaming, and households might have balance expectations around you should play a sport or whatever it is. For many kids, what they're doing less of is not physical activity, it's actually consuming other passive media like TV.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I
Yeah.
grew up, when I wasn't gaming, people would just sit around and watch a lot of TV. Well, no one really watches TV. They watch streaming these days. They watch, their Netflix or their Amazon. They're watching YouTube, they're watching Twitch, and they're playing games. So if you look at just their leisure time, for many young people, for parents, they grew up watching TV, their kids are gaming, and gaming is more interactive, and you have more agency in a game than you do with TV, where you're just passive. You're just sitting there. You can't make any decisions. So that's the first thing. And then if you know that you've got a kid who's really into this and you're looking at what are resources available to them, I mean, there's so many right now. And, one, I would just say whatever area you're in, I would just say Google gaming camp or esports camp, and you'll probably see some options that are near you. Many of these options do lean into developing skills towards a career. Again, I know our friends at Future First do that a lot. A group that I recommend really strongly is a nonprofit that is called NASEF, NASEF.org. That stands for the North American Scholastic Esports Federation. And so they really, they originated this term Scholastic Esports. Two terms you might not have thought would go together if you think esports is a waste of time. So Scholastic is all about learning, esports, playing video games in a competitive format. And so they, as a nonprofit, all their programming is free. They give curriculum to community centers or K through 12 teachers all over the country and all over the world. And really, they're kind of sneaky. I say they use video games as a Trojan horse for learning. Yeah. So it's kind of like, you get them in the door with video games, and then by accident, you get some life lessons and you learn a little English or math. And so it's a really great program. So I strongly recommend them. If for anyone who's Googling, if they see something in their city and it's a NASEF affiliate, that's a pretty good mark that they're using curriculum that starts with student outcomes in mind, basically, and uses gaming for that. But there's many, many great programs and more popping up every month, because, even if you're a really well-intentioned educator, if you don't have the kids' attention, it doesn't really matter. It all starts with that. And
Yeah.
gaming gets people's attention because they're fun. So yeah.
Yeah, and we'll touch a little bit more about how gaming and attention, and when it comes to enticing students to be engaged, right? I remember back in the day, like we had like a program where they'd give you PlayStations and it would be educational games, like you're saying, and it kind of tricked you into learning. Carmen San Diego games would like be really fun and were really mass appeal, but you're also learning about history and different things like that, right? So there are different ways that you can introduce. Not only you talked about that skill of learning and teamwork and development and socially as well, but also educationally, also career development. There are a lot of different ways to get that benefit for not only students, not only parents, but also colleges as well. But we'll touch on that a little bit more. You did talk about NASEF, right? Again, if you guys didn't hear, North Atlantic Scholastic Esports Federation, right? You're chair of NASEF. And you've been around these industries. You've seen the pipeline personally, where high school students were coming from whatever elementary, middle school they were, going into high school, and then going into the gaming space and collegiate space, and possibly beyond to as a person who is a founder, who is a head of an esports club. What, though, are some changes that you would like to see in this pipeline and making sure that it's easier for these high school students in order to navigate through the pipeline, to be in this industry, to get benefits? Because it's not even just about being in this industry. As we talked about, there are other ways in which, hey, you have this development as to be in this industry, but you may branch off to something else, but you still gain a benefit. So what are some changes you would like to see to help these students navigating?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's a lot because the whole esports industry is really very young. You know,
Yeah.
it's very fragmented. People
Mm-hmm.
often call it the Wild West, which is accurate.
Yeah.
You know, if you look at things like traditional sports, we collectively had like 200 years, 150 years in the US of at one point, there were a whole bunch of different football leagues and they were all competing. And then there was some consolidation and we didn't have any organization in college. And, it blew people's minds like, oh, wait, you can make money like throwing that pigskin? Like, that seems weird. That's where we are, where, people are still like, wait, the Fortnite kid made $3 million? Like,
Yes.
so it's usually just that people kind of can't believe it. And so a lot of the structures and systems, and of course, sports isn't perfect either. It's getting better. And so esports, those of us in the industry, we're trying to kind of learn from what took sports a long time to get to and get it right from the beginning around esports. But we're very young. We're like a colt that's just been born and it's a little wobbly and sometimes it falls down. So, the esports industry, it's working on, I'd say, diversity and accessibility and inclusion. It's far from perfect. There can clearly be sometimes, particularly in that high school age, where there's like a more toxic atmosphere online, right? So the industry's trying to level up, trying to have better role models, that are demonstrating that. For parents out there, they should know that most games do have controls where if someone's being inappropriate, they're being an ass. You can mute them, you can report them. There are tools in the game that kind of help the community manage out bad actors. But that is, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for parents to use gaming to help their young person be a better digital citizen, because it's not unique to gaming. The same thing happens on social media and any other platform. It's just for many kids, gaming's their first step into that online world. So how do you learn to be nice? How do you learn to be like trusting, but not too trusting? You have to have a little stranger danger. It's just like the real world. It's just like your kid in the real world, but there's these opportunities to learn. So those are things not unique to esports, but just about the online world that every young person grows up in, that we're all working on. And then when it comes to college and high school, it's a very fragmented space right now. And I know we're going to talk about colleges in a bit, but really these institutions like high schools, like colleges, the fact that they've started to adopt esports, it tends to be good for the college because it keeps them relevant, because that's what the kids are into. Is also good for esports because these institutions have practice with things like traditional sports. And so it's a win-win when colleges and high schools start to adapt esports, because it starts to put a little more structure and regularity, make it a little less Wild West and a little more of like a defined path for everyone.
Yeah, and that's something that we would like to see, a more defined path. And as you said, this is still in our infancy stages. So we're still before, it took the NCAA to be involved, NCAA to be involved with college sports in order to develop that, and for you to get offer letters and D9 and everybody to make that contact with recruiting and everything like that. But again, things are growing, and you talked about things growing in the college space, right? All of these colleges it's exploding, the esports scene in college. I look it up in on the news right now. I see Hastings College is experimenting with things. You have places like Northwest State Community College, SUNY. You have Fisher College, Sacramento State, Iona College. Even right now in our very own Wilmington University, they're also expanding and getting more labs and lab equipment. However, sometimes when it comes to administrative things, they're still learning. They still don't understand everything about the collegiate esports space. So what are some of the benefits for these colleges to invest in this space for not only themselves, but for the students, for donors, boards, et cetera, and beyond, to make sure that we can get this system, as you see in the sports space, is thriving and it's helping a lot of these colleges? How can that also be transferred to the esports space so colleges also benefit as well?
Yep. Yeah. So there's a lot of values to the university, and there's also, again, kind of some learnings that are still happening ongoing. So
Mhm.
just to kind of summarize the landscape. So right now in 2022, there's over 200 universities that are giving college scholarships for esports athletes. And this has pretty much doubled every year. So, it barely existed 5 years ago. And now over 200 giving scholarships. So that's one pretty significant data point. To the fragmentation question, some colleges say they have a club team, and some say they have a varsity team. And there's not one definition, but usually varsity means a paid coach and an on-site place to play. Those are kind of some of the usual requirements. And then they may or may not give scholarship, right? So about 200 varsity, almost every college has a club. The other thing that is not uniform is there's about 40% of the colleges with varsity have them under athletics. So the same place they have their basketball or their football team. But another 40% have them under student affairs. So where they have their clubs, maybe their whatever Asian college student club or, Frisbee club, whatever it is that's student run. And then about 20% have them under academics, usually because those universities are teaching something like game design or esports. So they put it under academics. So there's not like a one size fits all there. But when we're talking with universities, and to your question on benefits, I mean, usually they think about three potential opportunities, and some colleges are doing all three. So for some, it's mainly a recruiting tool. Some colleges are looking at their enrollment numbers, and their enrollment is going down. It's competitive for them, and they're trying to attract students. So those are the ones that, for recruiting, they'll often have a varsity team. Sometimes they'll have scholarships, because if they win tournaments and if they have scholarships, it's actually a pretty inexpensive way to recruit this group of kids that tend to be, on the average, a little, I mean, they're very motivated, smart, over index in tech. And so if you want to reach that group and you're like, hey, we won Rocket League, we won Overwatch, and we have scholarships, it's a lot cheaper than standing up a football team or a basketball team. Just if you just look at the sheer dollars for scholarships. So that's why many of the first schools, universities that offered these scholarships and went varsity, they didn't have the traditional athletic program. They were small, private, sometimes liberal arts schools that kind of said, hey, we can kind of leapfrog and we can take a lead on this new sport, because we never invested in a football team. So that's recruiting. Yeah. For some schools, it's more about retention and just like the quality of life for the students that they already have. And those schools are investing in like gaming centers or big esports centers on their campus. Mm-hmm. And that's about engaging a lot of their students, more than just the esports team, but many students. So when you're doing student tours, you know, again, in my day, it might have been like, you have a bowling alley, or, you know, how's the fitness room? Do you have vegetarian food? You know, whatever's on the list of people that they're looking for. A lot of kids these days are like, you have a gaming center? How's your esports team? You know, they're not looking for a scholarship. It's just a social activity. Mm-hmm. And so those schools are investing in these gaming centers that are often in the student union or some other facility, about retaining their population. It's just kind of like an amenity. And then the final piece is curriculum, where colleges are saying, okay, more than just recruiting or retention, we actually want to build curriculum. We want to usually tie it to industry so that our kids can major in this or minor in this or have some electives or some certifications and help them get jobs. And so some universities do all three and some are just doing one or two, but there's a lot of different opportunity out there.
Yeah, and I want to delve into each of them more deeply, because you talked a little bit. First, let's talk a little bit about retention, right? Unfortunately, because the pandemic, because student loans, because of that, there are declining rates of students who are enrolling in colleges. There might be declining retention as well, because, you know, you might start off with colleges, but when the loans hit you, it's harder. You might go to a community college. You might have to not go at all. So there needs to be something that could hold you in college in these spaces. And it seems that for some colleges, they're taking privy to the fact that, what do kids like? We talked about driving them in, right? Education is one. They like video games in the way that you can trick them into fostering into their education. Hey, using video games as an enticing thing to get them inside. So what is your experience with seeing how this works? And do you think that this would be a good benefit going forward for a lot of these colleges in making sure that they could have this retention increase, maintain the retention, maybe via scholarships, recruit more people as well? How do you see this working out? And is this a good idea for colleges?
Yeah, I mean, I think leading with retention, you know, most people that work in esports or do anything with esports, you'll hear two words over and over again. Sometimes they're kind of overused, but you hear them over because they're correct. You know, one is authenticity, like keep it real, keep it authentic. Gamers can smell out BS. And the other one is community. It's all about community. Mm-hmm. Back to what we were saying before. It's a social thing more than people think. It's a way to connect. It's a way to belong. It's a way to find your tribe. It's a way to fit in. And so really, I think that's the main message around a college that's looking at retention. Is, to your point, it's like we went through COVID. I mean, the poor kids that started during COVID, you know, many deferred or decided to not go. Some went, everything was online. They couldn't build the same sort of connection that they were expecting to build. So having a center, having a physical place, having a team that you might play for or you might just cheer for. This is just a way to build community. And it's a way that happens to be very fitting for our time when, even though during COVID, like gaming events were not as fun because people couldn't gather, they did still happen. I mean, when traditional sports completely stopped, music concerts completely stopped, there was nothing. Gaming continued because it's not as good, but you can still do it online. Our battlefield is virtual. We were social distancing from before it was cool, as we say. So the show could go on, and so an activity like that, not only is it a little more COVID resilient, I guess, but for some schools who might be commuter schools, maybe they're serving a population. I think even Will Mew here, or the partner, might be like this, where they might be serving a population that is a little bit older. Maybe they're balancing another job or coming back, and they need kind of some flexible delivery of courses. An activity like esports and an esports team, again, it's flexible to support that, because playing on the center is best if you can do it. But if someone couldn't make it because of their schedule and they have to go online, well, you can do that. You can't do that with your basketball team. You can't do that with your soccer team. You can do that. So it's all about building community, I think, when it comes to retention. And I mean, speaking of community, I'll shout out our friends at HBCU Esports League, right? Who, I think that's one of, there's numerous examples in the collegiate space. I think that's a great one of, their name is literally community, but linking together this cohort, in this case of the historically, Black colleges and universities, and building a league product, because I think that created stickiness, not just with maybe a Morehouse or Morris Brown or whoever's playing, but a broader community, because they're playing against one another. It builds rivalry, but also camaraderie. So that's an example. I would expect that those schools that are participating are seeing some, retention benefits, because that's an activity that wasn't there before. It's another source of pride of folks getting to play on behalf of that school. This often engages a demographic that is a little different than, the ones that might be on the football team or the track team, right? So it's a group that might not be as engaged with the college if this wasn't here. They're going to be gaming regardless, I guarantee you, but they might not be gaming on behalf of their university. So builds community, builds camaraderie, and, I believe the stats will help with retention.
Yeah, and I can make a personal testament about that. I was in band at an HBCU, marched with Morehouse College, but I went to Spelman College. And there was a time that a lot of people lost their scholarships, unfortunately, due to funding. But they found ways, because they were in band, they found ways to keep involved and make sure that they could stay and still engage with their degree, because they know that they needed that degree, but the band kept them going, and that was their source of community and another push to make sure that, hey, I want to stay and complete here instead of transferring to somewhere else. So that is important, making sure that you're keeping numbers. But as a professor of you're also, like I said, many hats. All right. You're adjunct professor for UGA in esports, and also too a founder of an esports club, Ghost Gaming. I want you to touch a little bit about, for the faculty who might be here who are trying to recruit and they're trying to get people involved in their esports clubs, what are ways in which that they can recruit the next wave of gamers to make sure that they can foster their programs? What they start of it, they can foster their program so they can make sure that it grows, so that, they can all grow together.
Yeah. So the question is kind of, how do you recruit members into your esports club, I guess. Yeah, I think there's a bunch to that. I mean, the first thing is whether your company or your entity, nonprofit, whether you are an online organization or an in physical space, because both can work. There are some clubs, they don't have any bricks and mortar location. They probably have a Discord and they're very active over the online, but they just have opted to not have a physical location, versus others, that are maybe LAN centers that are starting to pop up that actually have a location. They have an address on Google Maps where people meet. And so there's very different techniques, obviously, because one, you're recruiting from a geographic area, and the other, you're really recruiting around the globe, and there's pros and cons between them. So that's just a kind of a strategy question for your club. Fortunately, even if whether you're in person or whether you're online, this gaming audience, they live online. They live online, and they love content that speaks to them, that is not an ad in their face, but is just interesting content, right? They consume content like crazy. And, for anyone older that's used to like mainstream, where you watch one programming on TV and it's fed to you, this is the opposite. This is like the consumer's in control. They've got an infinity dial, and they're just like, oh, I'm into Rocket League. Bloop. I'm going to follow this Rocket League Twitter. I'm going to join these Rocket League Discords. I follow these YouTubers. I follow these streamers, and I kind of self-cultivate my Rocket League feed. Someone else is doing that for Apex Legends. Someone else is doing that for NBA 2K. So, be aware that that's how people consume content. Be aware that there's actually not that many just like fans of esports. It's more like people are fans of certain games. Esports is like sports. Like I like college basketball. I couldn't care less about golf. Most people are like that. I mean, some people like a lot of sports. Some people like a lot of games. Some people like one. So your choice of game, if you're building an esports club, is pretty important too. You need to think about why you picked that game, and then you need to go to the channels that talk about that game, and you need to engage with those communities, and you need to give value to those communities. And that's really the way it starts. Whether you're trying to recruit people to your club, or you're just a person who's wanting to get a job. When I ran High Res, and I'll use the game Smite. So we probably hired 50 people over many years, over a long period of time, but directly from the community, because those people were just giving to the community, usually through content. They were writing the tier list of the great ones and the crappy ones to play. And they were they were doing videos and how-to guides. And they were talking about the esports scene, and they're just putting content out there. And sometimes that gets you discovered by the developer, gets you a job, or maybe it would get you discovered by an esports team that's playing in that game. So I think picking the game is really important, and then give to the community, which doesn't cost you anything but time, oftentimes. And usually if you do that consistently or often, you can get recognized, by an org, or to your question, by other players that want to attach themselves to whatever it is you're building.
Yeah, consistency and authenticity are two of the biggest things that you want for recruitment, for gaining people, for making sure you retain these students. And one more thing, Professor Harris, when it comes to the collegiate side of the esports world, you talk about curriculum, and also too, there might be faculty who are here who are trying to build a curriculum for their esports organization. What are some things that you've developed a program, I'm sure, for the UGA? What are some things that you've taken away, things that you've noticed that, hey, I thought it would be one way, maybe I should do it another, some improvements that you've seen along the way, just a guidance for anyone who's building a curriculum for esports?
Yeah, the industry, because as we talked about, it's a little bit the Wild West. You're kind of chasing a moving target, which can be challenging. It's not like Shakespeare, he hasn't written anything in a while, gaming, there's a new game all the time, and so that can be tough. So my guidance is to try to partner with industry, because that will ensure, or it will at least help you keep your curriculum current, and it will help tie your curriculum to where the jobs are, which ultimately, I think more and more these days, people are looking at higher education, they're looking at the cost of it, they're looking at the return of it, and they're like, okay, is that going to really get me a job? So by staying close to the gaming and esports industry, I think it helps with both of those things. The model that we have here in Georgia, I'll talk about just because there's some general principles, and this is not something that I invented. I kind of discovered what Georgia did around the film and TV industry. And so a few things happened here. The state of Georgia passed this really good tax incentive for movies being made here. Then a bunch of private companies built studios like crazy. And so everything started to be shot here. Stranger Things, Walking Dead, every Marvel movie. But for a while, there wasn't a workforce here. So there's all these studios, they're all full, but everyone was flying in from LA. And if you're a taxpayer in Georgia, these companies are getting a tax credit. You're not really doing it so people can come from a different state. You want those jobs to be in your state. So a very smart program was started up called the Georgia Film Academy, GFA, and it lets a student at any Georgia school, 4-year university, 2-year HBCU, whoever it is, they go to the Georgia Film Academy and they're taught by industry people how to work in the film and TV industry. So, it's really cool. You're in a working studio, and right next door, they're making the Black Panther 2. And you're taught by the people that are working on the Black Panther 2. And then you get an internship, and then you're golden. So we took that same template and stood it up for gaming and esports. And so the principles there are public-private partnership, and whenever possible, trying to have industry people, if not teach as adjuncts, maybe at least kind of guest speak when possible. And then you have this nice kind of loop around the curriculum back to industry around, well, what tools are still current, what technologies are still current. Yes, you're learning the history of things like the gaming industry, which isn't going to change, but what are the trends that have just come up in the last year? Forget about the last year. If you look at Twitch in the last week, it's a very vibrant industry where you're always having to learn and stay abreast of what the norms are, what the laws are. So for that reason, again, partner with industry whenever possible, if you're building curriculum.
Yeah, partner with industry. And I'm so glad that you talked about the Georgia tax credit thing, because I was actually going to transfer a conversation into talking about things in the local level. So right on the same page. You talked a little bit about a benefit, a good thing that's coming up in the local Atlanta scene. And that's great. I'm glad that you did. But what are some challenges that you see as the industry at the local level? I know you talked a little bit about the fragmentation. That might be one, but is there anything else that you might see that's happening? And how do you go about fixing that? Or how would you go about fixing it?
That's a good question. I don't really see too many challenges specific to, I'll say, our local area. We're pretty fortunate just that, as you know, you're here, we happen to live in Atlanta where the conditions are pretty good as far as just, low unemployment, generally strong. Businesses are moving here, not moving away, right? Still relatively affordable, even though that's creeping up. So, we have challenges like any big city does, but the high level factors are pretty good here. So I don't really see anything that's Atlanta specific. I will say that more broadly, I think, I think the industry is still kind of trying to, it's learning how to best activate and really monetize these bricks and mortar centers like land centers, because it's still relatively new here. And, if you just simplify the world, like traditional sports, it was born in the physical world, soccer fields, basketball fields, baseball fields, ice hockey rinks. And now sports is trying to figure out like how to be relevant online. Well, all the kids are online. They're all watching TikTok. How do we increase our TikTok audience? How do we get more relevant on YouTube? So they're going from like the real world to the virtual world. Gaming is like the flip. Gaming was born online, Discord, Twitch, multiplayer games, playing online with your friends. And it's done a good job with live events. That's what Skillshot does, where people come together and they celebrate, and those are good energy. And now with COVID, we're getting back to them. But these other persistent centers, like like a land center, like a university student union, they're just relatively new compared to things like the corner basketball court that's existed for a long, long time. So whether that's a challenge, whether that's an opportunity, they're just new. And so the business models around those things are still evolving.
Business models are still evolving, and so are you as a person. We talked a little bit about how you started with high res, and now you have Skillshot. You also have Ghost Gaming, an adjunct professor as well, many hats, as I said. But since you've done so much in this space, you've had a lot of success, a little bit of a celebration of you, or a celebration for other people who are watching. What has been the most rewarding step of this entire process that you've been through?
Wow. I mean, shipping our first game is definitely a highlight. Making a game is really hard work. In general, it's very easy to start things, and it's very hard to finish things, to get them over the finish line, right?
Yes.
Like, so shipping that, which took us 5 years, our very first game, and it wasn't a financial success, but it was satisfying just getting to the finish line with a team, this kind of founding team we built. So that was definitely a highlight. I think in the esports world, when I left Hi-Res, the game developer, and started doing this other stuff, it really was just because I saw this tremendous potential for gaming for good. I just saw it in my life, with my son's life and others, that if it was delivered the right way, it could do a lot of good. So I think, two really compelling stories in that lane. One is when I talked with a young man, Daniel, and he was playing our game. He's playing Smite. It happened to be for his varsity high school team. And, he had been for years confined to a wheelchair. So he could never play traditional sports. And so for the first time, he was representing his school. He earned a varsity jacket, and he wanted to grow up and, make games, right? So that's super satisfying and valuable, obviously, and motivating. And then one more, this one I get a little emotional because it's so deep, but so this was an organization, Make-A-Wish Georgia, that I partner with, and they do amazing work, granting wishes for kids that are fighting critical illnesses. And so a lot of the kids, it's supposed to be their heartfelt wish. And so we actually got to know the organization because kids wanted to come to some of our live events. That was their wish, right? So we got to know the organization and do more with them. And so, but this one kid, Ethan, who's battling leukemia, he was a big gamer. And so his wish, which is the most selfless wish ever, he kept a notebook of a game that he wanted to make. The game was called Protocol. It was all about, him fighting leukemia and how you couldn't do it on his own. So he needed to collect a group of friends, all with different powers. And together they would take down Dr. Luca, who was leukemia, and the Blast. And he had all these designs, all the character designs. Yes. And so it was so amazing. So we worked with a local group here. It was Kennesaw State, just down the road. Their students, some of the high res developers, mentoring them, and Ethan talked with them about his design. And this student team during COVID worked through to make his game come to life and presented it to him on his last day of chemo. Right. So, and he did great. Ethan's doing great, but what a selfish wish. And, no better way to talk about gaming for good and the power of gaming. Right.
Oh
It's
my
just amazing.
gosh. It's so amazing. That kind of legitimately makes me want to tear up.
Yeah, mean, I've shared the story a lot, and every time it's like I choke up because it's just
Yes.
such an amazing kid.
You never know what benefit you can have by, just making a friend, by playing these games, by making these games, by putting on a production, streaming towards other individuals. This community is so lovely. You talked about gaming as a community. It genuinely is. It genuinely is. And you never know how you might help or impact someone later on in the future. It's a beautiful thing. One last question before I do, I guess, some more formalities. What's some advice for those who are in this industry, who want to be in this industry? Some advice that you've picked up along the way that helps you keep going, or something that might help somebody else keep going?
Well, it's a topsy-turvy industry, like I said. So I think, things are going to happen and, sometimes it's just blaming the industry and not internalizing it and blaming yourself. Right. Because it's still kind of the Wild West. It's like, you might be doing a great job for a game developer. That game developer, just the game doesn't do as well as they thought they would do, and they have to kind of lay off. Like, those things happen, right? So I think it's just staying as positive as you can when those things happen. I think just showing up engaged, maybe you can't do it every day, but as many days as possible, if you can just engage and lean in, no matter what you're doing, people recognize that eventually, and opportunities will come to you. So that's more not specific to gaming, but just general advice. And just, again, create as much as possible. I mean, you mentioned authenticity and consistency. If you're a content creator, if you want to work in making games, like, try to just put games out there. They don't have to be full. You're not building NBA 2K. You can do a really small game. And here's another big one. When you put your game out there, when you put your video out there, when you put your tweet out there, like, it's a very careful mental balance around taking feedback from the community, but also not, like, obsessing about it and getting yourself down, right? Like, you have to be you have to put your stuff out there. Either way, you have to build up a fairly thick skin, and as long as you're putting it out there with purpose and following your own core values, like, sometimes the internet can be cruel. It just can, right? And so I think that's another lesson. So those are a few.
Yes, learn how to be you in the best way possible, and give forth, give back, be yourself in your most authentic way in the best ways possible. I really appreciated this talk. What are some exciting things that you want to share that maybe, like, skills shot, Ghost, or etc. might be doing
We're
later
doing
on?
a lot. So
Yeah.
Skill Shot, of course, we Tuesday, like most Tuesday nights, we'll be running back the HBCU Esports League. We love people to tune in
I'll
and
be
watch
there.
that. Skill Shot's going to be doing a live event for a game called Brawl. If you have, it's a great fighting game. It's going to have the largest prize pool of any fighting game to date. Literally $500,000. Costs
Ooh.
$50 to enter, and you can win $500,000. And they're paying out to, like, place number 128. That's going to be
Ooh.
early November. It's going to be a hype event. You should Google that and come on down and join us for that. Ghost, our Rocket League team, plays tomorrow. We need to qualify for the fall split. So cheer on Ghost, rep Ghost tomorrow in Rocket League. And then the final thing I will say, in terms of an event, if you are an educator or you're interested in the esports industry and how that intersects with education, definitely would encourage folks to come to a summit that we're having in Atlanta, a live event that's called Esports Summit. You can Google that or just go to esportsummit.live. It's the middle of November, and it'll be a few hundred business and education leaders talking a lot more in depth around what we talked about today. So speakers from Twitch, speakers from game developers, leading collegiate coaches, leading high school program directors, all coming together. That'll be a good time. And that's right ahead of DreamHack Atlanta,
Yes.
which is a fun live festival. 20,000, maybe 30,000 gamers, Georgia World Congress Center. So plenty of events coming up.
A lot of exciting things afoot, and I'm so glad that I could have this conversation with you, Todd. It was a great time, and I can't wait to see what you might have forward in your future, skill shot, ghost, or etc. Thank you so much for joining me.
Of course. Thanks for the great questions. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully you got value out of it. If you want, follow me on Todd Allen Harris, LinkedIn and Twitter. That's all I use, but I use those a fair bit. So.
Yes, and you can also follow me, Bordey McBored, BORDYMCBORD on Twitch, on Twitter, on YouTube, and in a lot of different other spaces. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much, Future First Gaming. Thank you so much, Wilmington University. And we're going to throw it back to break so you guys can enjoy some more fall brawl action. See ya.